Hello everybody, this is Fun Police, and I am making another Fire and Maneuver video. Today is going to be looking at the patch notes for Update 1.2, the Blue Danube. This is a patch that has just come out today, the day I'm recording this, so everything is super new to us, so I can't comment on everything, but I wanted to go over the patch notes and just share some general thoughts alongside including some showing off of the new features. So starting out, we're going to take a look at this new map, which finally unlocked these small nation flags, which doesn't mean a whole lot outside of just looking nice. But the biggest thing is that a handful of different scenarios have been added. These are like single player challenges. We have the map of La Muncel, Milazzo, Malakoff, and Williamsburg, Virginia. These are 4 missions that you can now play. They're single player only. Seemingly you're supposed to be able to pick both nations, or maybe not, but you at least only can pick one right now. Also, you can adjust the difficulty, but they're just preset scenarios that offer a little bit of single player content. There's definitely probably going to be more of these between more of the nations, but this is the first look at it. On top of that, we're also seeing a ton of balance changes, so let's jump into a quick custom match where I can show those off. You can also select one of 3 periods now, which is All Period, Age of Glory, and Age of Rifles. But starting off with the largest set of changes, Cavalry has gone up, has its price increased by 25 points. So now most of these are quite expensive, sitting on the heavier end of Infantry. Or actually, that is miswritten. I'm looking at it just now. They're saying it is actually supposed to be a buff. So I believe this is actually, most Cavalry have gone down by 25 points. And this is because Cavalry have received some other nerfs that have more drastically affected how they do what they can do. We also have a massive buff for artillery, with every unit with the cumbersome perk going down by 40 points. This means something like the light artillery is 40 points cheaper. And on top of that, it's actually gone down even more because 3 range artillery have gone down another 45 points. So that means that this light artillery should be 85 points cheaper than what it used to be, making it dirt cheap, even cheaper than some of the most infantry. 4 range units, such as kind of the standard 12 pounds, have gone down 25 points, so 65 point reduction in total. And 5 range units, which the French don't have, but those have gone down 5 points. This is a big buff to most of the artillery. These things are now dirt cheap, and although they're still vulnerable, it's a lot more affordable to lose one of them now, because these guys are about as cheap as some of your most basic infantry. And because of that, it's pretty reasonable to probably fit 1 or 2 artillery pieces into most compositions now for long-range firepower. Especially with the changes to cavalry, we can have potentially a little easier time protecting them. Speaking of cavalry, the biggest thing that has happened is that range vulnerable, which is a debuff that is added to a handful of units, including cavalry and infantry in the march column, now gives a +2 damage penalty instead of +1. On top of that, attack columns, which are the ones that allow a unit to move in 2 spaces and shoot, now also are range vulnerable. +2 vulnerability essentially means that units take 2 additional damage. So if you would take 1 damage while being shot at, you instead take 3. This means that cavalry is very vulnerable. Because they only have mostly 3 cohesion, it's very easy for them to lose all of their cohesion in 1 shot. And even for the heaviest of cavalry, they don't exactly last long under fire. Beyond that, we also have some other changes. Units are able to... units that are on hills are able to fire over elevation, so they essentially get the indirect perk, making hills more important when in combat. There is also a change to the Breakable Trait. Let's switch over to a faction that has that. We'll just go with the US. But the Breakable Trait, a unit has to regain its cohesion before you can order it. So if you break a unit's cohesion and it retreats away from you but doesn't regain its cohesion, then it has to just essentially fall back again. This means that rushing and spamming out a bunch of breakable units is definitely a lot weaker now. Because if they break in a melee, then they'll fall back, suffer attrition, and then have to fall back a second time, and they'll probably get wiped out while doing so. So this is a pretty noticeable nerf to some of the militias. You're going to have to definitely not spam cheap units anymore. That is quite a notable change there. On top of that, hard cover, which is something like a strong stone-walled village, now can be damaged if you flank them. So no longer does a stone wall provide like invincibility from any angle. If you can get around to the sides, you can now shoot and damage them. There's also square formation has received a buff. It no longer can be flanked. This should make square a little bit easier to use because now, regardless of where it gets charged, the square formation should be able to take it in a strong manner. There is also some more specific nerfs. Let's start with the US. The only change to the US is that the Zouaves have been limited to 6 instead of having infinite. Not massively important, but you can't spam them out. This is also true for many other nations, but one that is quite notable is that... Let's see if we can edit this. We can't. Well, regardless, the sharpshooters in the Confederates no longer have their superior rifles in the early period. So, in the Age of Glory, they no longer get the Sharps M1848 on their units. So, their snipers are overall weaker in the early scenario, which is probably justified because the Whitworth sharpshooters were pretty overpowered, honestly, in Age of Glory, because they had range drill efficiency and could double fire with range. Just kind of a ridiculous combination that almost no one else had. So now that's no longer there. You also have changes to Italy. Notably, the Fusil M1866 has now been limited. So now I believe you can only give it to 2 units. So you're not able to give a ton of Italian units this stronger rifle. You'll have to pick carefully who you give it to. On top of that, the Bersaglieri. I know I just butchered that name. I apologize. But these guys are limited to 4 now, so you can't spam them out. You also have a nerf to the Carabinieri, which have also been limited to 4, so you can't spam them out as much in larger modes. The Ottomans have also received a handful of changes. Like the Italians, their stronger rifle has been limited to 2. You also have a limit on their infantry. Egyptian line infantry have a limit of 6 now, so they can't be spammed out to infinite. And the Zouaves have been limited to 4. These are probably nerfs that are hitting Ottomans somewhat hard, because the Ottomans have a lot of breakable units, so they're going to suffer from a lot of they're not able to spam their units out as much, and some of their stronger melees, like the Zouaves, are no longer as efficient. Although their artillery did get a lot cheaper, so maybe that makes up for it. There's definitely just like a big meta shift that's happening, so we'll have to see. The Russians, the same thing has happened with them. Their stronger rifle has a limit of 2 now, so you can't spam it out. Only 2 units can have it. There is also the British, who have received a handful of changes. There is now a stronger rifle, but it is limited to 2. But it is potentially quite scary. You put this on like foot guards, and you have elite efficiency range drill double fire infantry for the British. Quite powerful. Oh, I overlooked something. There's also some changes to the Highlanders, which have had their limit from 4 to 6. So now you can actually spam them out a bit more. So you can put Highlanders, and you can have a lot more Highlanders than you did previously. On top of that, Dragoon Guards, my apologies. Dragoon Guards have a limit of 4 now, so they're a little more limited in numbers. You have the Prussians. The Werder rifle is now at a limit of 2. So this is similar. On top of that, your Bavarian infantry are a limit of 6 now. So you can't get, this should be a limit of 6. I guess maybe it's not implemented yet. I'm not exactly sure what this patch note is saying then, if we can just keep spamming them out. Maybe that got overlooked in the patch or bugged out a little bit. But it says the Bavarians are from 0 to 6. So in theory, you should only be able to get 6 of the Bavarians. But for some reason, that's not implemented. Maybe that'll be hot fixed. You also have the French. The Zouaves have been limited to 6. And the Voltigeurs have been limited to 2. So this is a notable nerf to a lot of the lighter, quick-moving infantry. Then you also have the Austrians as the final ones, which has arguably the largest set of patches. So the first thing is that the German line infantry have been reverted. They no longer have the melee drill perk that they did in Update 1.1. The Hawk and Duschmeisters still have their melee perks, so they're still very strong in melee. On top of that, the Hungarians and Germans now stand out a little bit more from each other. The Hungarians are a bit more of the melee-focused ones, while the German line infantry are kind of just your main line infantry. On top of that, the Saxon infantry have a limit of 6 now, up from 4. The Bavarians have a limit of 6 now. And Grenzers also have a limit of 6 now. So you can't spam some units out as much. Also, the Kaiserjägers have received a change. Instead of efficiency, they now have the range drill, which now balances out the Hawk and Duschmeisters that previously didn't have them. Austria now has 1 unit at least that has the range drill to give you stronger range firepower. But the Hawk and Duschmeisters are now still your close range combat units. So those are all of the different balance changes. Definitely a lot to take in. The biggest thing I think overall is that a lot of units have seen limits placed on them. So you can no longer spam out specific units in mass if you wanted to. Just overall makes it so you kind of have to shake up your units if you don't want to, like, you can't rely on specific units as much anymore. On top of that, there's also nerfs to unit spam, which is a big one. On top of the nerfs to cavalry, and buffs to artillery, there's definitely a big change going on, and we'll definitely have to see how everything works. But anyway, let's just super quickly jump into a match, because the next thing we have to talk about is a mix of the new mode called Objective, some new maps, and then some bug fixes that we'll round this video out with. Doesn't matter. And then we'll turn the timer off. So 4 new maps were added to the game. The first one is Montevilla. You also have Twin Creeks, added in 1v1. In 2v2, you have Alpine Foothills, and then you also have the Battle of Magenta. So 4 new maps have been added. I'm going to go with the Montevilla as the starting one, and we'll quickly get this underway. But while that's loading, we can talk about a new thing, is that Melee has received a handful of changes, and this is a big one. If you've seen my guide on the American faction, you'll notice I talk a fair amount about Melee and how it's a bit buggy at the time. But now there should be some bigger changes. So the first thing first is that if a third unit gets into a melee, so say 2 units are in a melee and a third one goes to join, it will no longer alter the direction of a melee. Instead, it'll simply get behind your other unit. On top of that, charging into a melee no longer hurts friendly units. So these 2 changes are quite big, because what it means is that melee is now much more predictable, and you're able to get multiple units into a melee over several turns if you need to. Previously, melee was very buggy, where if you charged into a melee that you had your own units in, you'd probably deal more damage to your own troops than enemy troops. And on top of that, after a melee finished up, the direction of your units was seemingly random. This has been fixed. On top of that, withdrawing from a charge, there's been some bug fixes. So there's notably some better changes in how you can pull out of a melee. You can pull out of it diagonally now. Man, I can't talk. I'm so sorry tonight. I'm making this quite late at night because I want to get this out as soon as possible. But regardless, you're able to pull out at an angle now, and you're able to essentially be a little more flexible in getting out of a melee. On top of that, units with Breakable now retreat from a melee if they get 0 cohesion, so you're able to shatter units completely. And then units that get charged will no longer charge themselves if they get in a melee. So they're not able to essentially, you can more reliably pin down something like a cavalry unit, because if you charge in, it seemingly will take priority over like other charges or movement or various other things. You won't have a time where you charge a cavalry unit and then the cavalry just essentially skips over your whatever the hell you did and charges your artillery. Now that doesn't happen. Also been some various bug fixes, but the other thing is the objective-based mode, which is essentially just coming out, but as you see, we have this area called Objective A. And to what I understand is essentially if you have units in one of these 2 hexes, then you will slowly tick down the enemy's point total. And what that does is it essentially makes it so whoever controls this objective will be the one winning, and it essentially discourages people from camping in the game, because with the buff to artillery there is a pretty serious problem where you might be able to spam artillery and sit in a corner and win, so hopefully this objective mode will discourage that. Beyond that, there's mostly been a large amount of tooltips added. So, for example, you can see, like, here's cohesion, disorganized, and see, we can just pop up a ton of different keywords. So the game is you're able to learn the game much better. So that should overall be a good thing, which it should be pretty good. I'm happy for that. On top of that, more sound effects, ton of bug fixes, and a handful of other things. But that is the primary elements of the patch. A major meta shift, new maps, some new single-player content. Overall, at least from first impressions, I like this. I like these changes. I definitely think that like the balancing of units is hopefully going to improve, and I like the direction they're taking. Especially, I'm very happy they added in an objective-based mode, because I honestly was getting quite tired of facing off against heavy artillery spam camping in a corner and having to figure out how to break that. But otherwise, let me know down in the comments if you like this patch. Have you played any matches with the new patch? What are your thoughts on it? Or is there anything that I've talked about that sounds interesting to you? Let me know down in the comments below. Also, make sure to like the video and subscribe. I'm going to continue doing more fire and maneuver content, and with this big patch out, I'm going to finally start up doing maybe some more guides and also maybe just some more gameplay. I delayed making any more guides because such a big patch was coming out, and as such, it's shifted the meta quite heavily. So that's why there's a bit of a delay in these videos. But otherwise, I want to thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And have a good day.